Get out of my lobby! This place isn't for people like you. The words didn't echo, they detonated. Every head in the marble lobby turned. The air shifted, heavy with the kind of silence that only comes after violence, even when it's just made of sound. Two police officers stood nearby, hands tense at their belts. In the middle of it all, a woman in a bright yellow suit did not move. Her arms folded, her chin lifted just enough to let the insult pass beneath her feet instead of through her chest. If you have ever been told you did not belong somewhere you built, stay right here. Because 45 minutes from this moment, this woman will fire every person standing around her, including the man who just screamed those words. Now, let's rewind to the exact second everything started to break. It was 10:03 p.m. inside the Horizon Grand Hotel in downtown Seattle. The chandelier lights spilled gold over white marble floors, but the room felt cold. Behind the front desk, the manager Gregory Vance, tall, sharp suit, sharper tongue glared across the counter as if judging trespass itself. He wasn't whispering. He wanted everyone to hear. His voice rose again, slicing through the air like a gavel. You think dressing up in a bright color makes you a guest here? You people never learn. Aisha Carter didn't answer. Her silence was its own language. She had come alone. No assistants, no publicists, no hint of the billion-dollar company she led. Just her, a single overnight bag, and a reservation that apparently meant nothing once her skin walked through that door. The security camera above the front desk blinked red, recording every second. Guests froze mid-check-in. One woman gasped. A man pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over the record button but too afraid to press it. The front desk clerk, a young woman with tight nerves and a looser conscience, looked down at her monitor and then up again, her lips parting but no sound coming out. Gregory leaned forward, his voice dropping into that dangerous calm of someone who thinks authority is the same thing as power. Hand over your ID and credit card. We will verify if they even belong to you. Aisha placed both items on the counter, slow, deliberate. The sound of plastic and metal against marble was louder than his voice. He didn't pick them up, he stared at her instead, searching for something that would make his suspicion right. The chandelier flickered once, as if the building itself were holding its breath. Aisha finally spoke. You should be careful, she said quietly, each word measured like a verdict. Sometimes the person you try to throw out is the one who decides whether you stay. Gregory laughed, short and cruel. Not tonight. But the clock on the wall was already ticking toward his last shift. The moment the words left his mouth, the hotel stopped breathing. Guests froze like statues carved out of confusion and fear. Even the soft jazz spilling from the ceiling speakers seemed to vanish mid-note. The chandelier above the marble floor glowed too bright, catching the pale face of the manager and the golden calm of the woman he had just humiliated. Two police officers stood a few feet away, unsure whether to act or to wait. They had been called minutes earlier by a front desk clerk who reported a suspicious woman using a stolen card. What they found instead was something far more complicated than a fraud case. Gregory Vance, the manager, straightened his navy jacket as if the fabric itself could justify his authority. I said, he repeated slower this time, savoring the dominance in each syllable, get her out of here. Oh, the woman in yellow did not flinch. Her name, though no one knew it yet, was Aisha Carter. Her voice when it came was steady, almost gentle, but there was iron inside it. You are making a mistake, she said. The officers exchanged glances. One of them, Officer Daniels, stepped forward. Ma'am, may I see your identification again? His tone was calm, cautious. Aisha turned slightly, meeting his eyes. You already have it, she replied. Her ID and credit card were still on the counter where Gregory had refused to touch them. The small rectangle of black titanium gleamed under the chandelier. Expensive, undeniable, but still ignored. Gregory barked, that is not a real card. We have seen fakes like that before. Scammers order them online to look rich. You people always try to look rich. That phrase, you people, landed heavier than any curse. A soft gasp broke from a woman standing near the elevator. Her teenage son whispered, Did he just say that? Yes, his mother answered quietly, and he said it loud. At the desk, the young clerk who had first called the police shifted her weight. Her name tag read Elena. Her hands trembled on the keyboard. She glanced at the monitor and saw something that made her chest tighten. The reservation system showed a penthouse suite booked under the name A. Carter, paid in full, confirmed with an executive code. She opened her mouth to speak, but Gregory's glare silenced her before any word escaped. "Sir," Officer Daniels said carefully, "she might be a legitimate guest. Maybe we should verify through—" "No need," Gregory interrupted. "I know her type. They walk in, act entitled, and expect to get away with it. She probably borrowed that suit for the night." He smirked, the kind of smirk that only existed to feed the room's discomfort. Aisha inhaled slowly, almost meditatively. Around her, whispers spread like static electricity. Someone muttered about recording. Another guest whispered that this was going too far. The tension in the lobby was now thick enough to feel on skin. Gregory turned to the crowd. "Everyone, please continue with your evening. This situation will be handled." His smile was tight, corporate, but fear was beginning to crack through the varnish. Aisha did not move. "Handled by whom?" she asked. "By me," Gregory said, puffing his chest. "Then perhaps you should handle yourself first." The sentence landed like a quiet thunderclap. It was not shouted. It was simply placed in the air, steady and undeniable. The officers looked at each other again. Officer Daniels finally picked up the ID from the counter. His eyes widened slightly as he read the name. "Ma'am," he said softly, "this says Aisha Carter." Gregory laughed. "See? Fake name. She probably pulled it from a magazine." But Officer Daniels did not laugh. The name was familiar. He had seen it on billboards across the city, under the Horizon Group logo. He glanced at her face again and realized why the calm in her eyes looked so practiced. "Sir," he said quietly to Gregory, "maybe we should take a step back." Gregory snapped, "Do your job." Elena's voice broke through for the first time, trembling but clear. "Mr. Vance, she is on the system. I just checked. She has the penthouse reservation." Gregory froze. The entire room tilted. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then he leaned over the counter, pointing a finger at her. "You think I do not know how scams work? They plant insiders. They fake reservations." His voice rose until the chandelier rattled. "Do you know how many times this has happened? People like her?" Aisha cut in, still calm. "People like me built this hotel, Mr. Vance." The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. Even the police stepped back. Elena swallowed hard. "Sir, the payment came from the corporate account, Horizon Group itself." Gregory blinked. "That cannot be." "It is," Aisha said. "But please, continue. I want to see how far you will take this." From the far corner, a guest raised a phone. "This is insane," he whispered, pressing record. The red light on the screen blinked like a warning flare. Gregory noticed and snarled, "Put that down. No filming allowed." But the tide had already turned. Aisha stood like a column of sunlight in the cold lobby, the yellow fabric of her suit catching the last reflection of the chandelier. Her voice, low but sharp, filled the space again. "You are not protecting this place," she said. "You are staining it." For the first time, Gregory hesitated. He looked at the officers, but they did not move. He looked at Elena, but she met his eyes without fear. Around them, the guests began whispering louder. Phones lifted, justice slowly tilting its gaze. And through it all, Aisha remained still, the calm center of the storm she had chosen not to start but was fully prepared to finish. The clock behind the desk ticked once 10:09 p.m., 7 minutes since the insult, and already the balance of power had begun to shift. At 10:12 p.m., the lobby of the Horizon Grand still glowed with that unnatural calm that only exists before something shatters. The chandelier hummed softly above, scattering its light across every tense face. Guests stood half-turned, unwilling to leave, drawn in by a mixture of discomfort and fascination. The two police officers lingered near the entrance, unsure whether they were witnessing a disturbance or a lesson. Aisha Carter remained at the center, still as a verdict. Her yellow suit was no longer a fashion choice, it was a signal flare against the marble gray of the room. Every second she stayed silent. The weight of her composure pressed harder on everyone watching. Gregory Vance paced behind the counter, trying to reclaim a rhythm he had already lost. His words came clipped, defensive. "You think standing there makes you right? You think your confidence means something here?" Aisha did not answer. She simply studied him, as though memorizing the exact moment arrogance became fear. Elena stood a few steps away from the counter, the glow of her monitor still showing A. Carter, VIP penthouse, confirmed. Her throat ached with unspoken truth. She wanted to speak again, to defend the woman in front of her, but she could feel Gregory's rage hanging over her shoulder like heat. One of the officers, Daniels, cleared his throat. Mr. Vance, he said. It looks like there might be a mistake. Gregory spun toward him. Officer, I have managed this property for 10 years. I know what a mistake looks like, and this is not one. The second officer, Martinez, crossed his arms. Sir, we are here to de-escalate, not to embarrass anyone. Oh. Embarrass? Gregory's voice cracked. She walked in here pretending to be someone important. Aisha finally spoke. Her tone did not rise. It simply filled the room. Pretending? She looked around, slowly meeting the eyes of the guests who had gathered. Do you all believe that too? That confidence from a black woman must be an act? No one replied, but the silence said everything. Elena's screen beeped again. She looked down, startled. The reservation record had just been locked by corporate headquarters, a sign that someone above her had noticed. A quiet shiver ran through her. Gregory leaned over the counter, lowering his voice to a hiss. Listen carefully. You have 10 seconds to walk out of my lobby before I call hotel security. You can take your fake card with you, but you will not step foot in a room here again. Aisha's gaze was steady. You already called the police, Mr. Vance. Who else do you plan to call to protect you from the truth? Her words landed differently this time. They carried patience, not anger, the kind of patience that frightened men who built their power on fear. From the corner, the guest who had been filming whispered to his phone's microphone. This is still happening. The manager is losing it. The red recording light blinked like a heartbeat. Gregory noticed and snapped. Sir, put that phone away or I will have you escorted out too. Ugh. The guest did not move. Freedom of the press, he said softly, not as a challenge but as a statement. Others lifted their phones higher. The crowd was no longer silent. It was watching. Elena stepped forward again. Mr. Vance, she is in the system. The payment came from the corporate account. Gregory slammed his hand on the counter. The sound cracked through the air like a gunshot. Enough! You are finished here, Elena. You hear me? Fired! Aisha tilted her head slightly. You fire people easily, Mr. Vance. But tell me, how do you plan to explain it when I fire you? For the first time, Gregory's mouth opened and no words came out. Elena's voice trembled but grew stronger. Sir, you need to stop. He turned on her, face flushed. You have no idea who you are defending. Elena met his stare. Neither do you. A murmur rippled through the lobby. The guests were not just spectators anymore, they were participants in a public reckoning. Someone whispered, She is the real deal. Another answered, She does not need to prove it. Gregory tried to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. He pointed at Aisha again. Leave now, or I will have you removed by force. Aisha took one step closer. Her voice was soft enough to make him lean forward, which made her next words cut even deeper. Force is what men use when logic has failed them. Officer Daniels shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Vance, maybe we should verify this with corporate before... Gregory cut him off. I said remove her, but neither officer moved. They had seen enough. Aisha turned toward Elena. You said my name was in the system, correct? Elena nodded. Yes, ma'am. Confirmed and locked. Thank you. Aisha turned back to Gregory. Then you have already lost. You just do not know it yet. Gregory tried to laugh, but it came out dry. You really think this act will get you somewhere? Aisha smiled, not sweetly, not kindly, but with quiet certainty. It already has. The sound in the room changed. Every whisper, every shuffle of feet became a part of the rhythm of exposure. The chandelier flickered once more, and its reflection landed on the hotel's motto engraved behind the front desk. Service, integrity, respect. Aisha's eyes lingered on the word respect. Then she looked back at Gregory. Do you see the irony? She asked. He followed her gaze, and for a brief second, the manager who had commanded an entire building felt smaller than the woman he had tried to erase. The officers said nothing. The guests kept filming. Elena stood taller than she ever had before. Aisha lifted her phone, tapped once, and spoke into it. Nia, prepare the confirmation packet. Yes, ma'am, a calm voice replied through her earpiece. Gregory blinked. Who are you calling? Aisha met his eyes. The only person whose approval you should have cared about. The clock struck 10:15 p.m., 12 minutes since the insult. The calm was over. What came next would decide the fate of everyone in that lobby. The phone in Gregory's hand started to ring. Each tone echoed through the lobby, slow and deliberate, like the countdown to a reckoning. He stared at the glowing screen, uncertain whether to answer. His fingers twitched, betraying the panic under his polished exterior. Around him, the room had transformed from a hotel lobby into a courtroom. The chandelier above no longer looked elegant. It felt accusatory, its crystals scattering judgment like light. The guests stood frozen, their phones recording every breath. The two police officers stayed by the door, watching, measuring every second before they would have to file their own reports. Aisha remained where she was, her calm almost unnatural. Her stillness made the others restless. "Answer it," she said. Gregory hesitated. The ringtone stopped. Then it started again, louder this time. The sound sliced through the murmurs. Finally, he picked it up and pressed the speaker button. "Front desk, this is Gregory Vance," he said, his voice hoarse. A crisp female voice responded. "Mr. Vance, this is corporate headquarters. You are on speaker with the Horizon executive line. We are monitoring a situation occurring in your lobby right now. Is that correct?" Gregory's face drained of color. He glanced at Aisha, who was watching him with quiet authority. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "There appears to be some confusion with an unauthorized guest." The voice on the phone remained even. "That guest is not unauthorized." Gasps rolled through the room. Elena covered her mouth. Officer Daniels shifted his stance. The voice continued. "The woman in front of you is Miss Aisha Carter, Chief Executive Officer of Horizon Group. Every building you manage is under her direction. You will treat her with the same respect you give this brand, or you will no longer represent it." The silence that followed was absolute. The hum of the lights, the tapping of distant elevator doors, even the shuffle of shoes, all of it stopped. Gregory's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Aisha took a step forward, her heels sharp against the marble. "You called the police on me," she said evenly. "You accused me of theft in a property I designed. Tell me, Mr. Vance, how does that align with the word carved on your wall?" Her hand pointed toward the engraving behind the desk. "Integrity." Gregory's throat worked hard to find a voice. I did not know, Miss Carter." "That is the problem," she said. "You never looked long enough to see who was standing in front of you." The older woman near the elevators whispered, "My God, she really owns this place." Others began nodding, murmuring disbelief mixed with admiration. Cameras zoomed closer, catching every tremor of realization. Elena stepped forward, tears shining in her eyes. "Miss Carter, I am sorry. I tried to stop him." Aisha turned to her, and for the first time her expression softened. "You spoke the truth when it mattered," she said. "That is what integrity looks like." Gregory lowered his phone. "Miss Carter, I deeply apologize. I did not mean any harm. It was a misunderstanding." Aisha's eyes did not leave his. "You meant every word," she said. "You said you people never learn. That was not a mistake, Mr. Vance. That was a belief." He swallowed, the weight of the crowd pressing in on him. "Please, if you would allow me to—" She raised a hand. "No, you have said enough. The more you speak, the smaller this place becomes." Her tone was not cruel. It was measured, precise, the kind of tone that did not require volume to command silence. Officer Martinez took a cautious step closer. "Ma'am, is there anything you need from us?" Aisha looked at him. "Just documentation," she said. "Every second has been recorded. That is all I need." Daniels nodded and began noting down the time. 10:22 p.m., he said quietly. Gregory was still clutching the phone. His voice trembled. "Corporate, please, there must be some way to—" The voice from the phone interrupted. "Mr. Vance, return your access card and step away from the desk. Your employment is suspended effective immediately pending review. Our regional director will arrive within the hour." The words fell like a sentence. Gregory's hand went limp. The phone slipped from his grasp, landing face down on the marble with a hollow clack. He looked around as if searching for someone to save him, but the only faces he found were watching, judging, remembering. Aisha turned slightly toward the guests. "You all saw what happened," she said softly. "Now you understand why we build our own doors when others refuse to open theirs." A quiet ripple of applause began from somewhere in the back. It was not loud, not celebratory, it was the sound of respect rediscovering its place. Gregory stumbled back a step, his confidence gone. "Miss Carter, please," he said. "I have a family." Aisha's eyes flickered with restraint but not pity. "Then I hope you teach them what you failed to learn here tonight." Elena watched, speechless. The officers exchanged glances, both aware that this was no longer a police matter. The security system chimed once. and the hotel monitors behind the counter lit up with a message from corporate. All staff on duty report to administrative review. The guests murmured, realizing they were witnessing history wrapped in justice. Aisha reached for her phone again. "Nia," she said, "mark the time 10:24 p.m. and begin the audit sequence." "Yes, ma'am." "Executing now," the voice replied. Gregory's name flashed on the monitor in red. His access privileges revoked, his employee code locked. One by one, other names followed. The crowd watched in awe as the screens confirmed what they already knew. The balance of power had shifted completely. Aisha looked around the lobby once more, her gaze sweeping over the faces that had stared, judged, and doubted. Her voice dropped to a near whisper, meant for everyone and no one at once. Silence does not protect the guilty. It exposes them. The chandelier above her steadied its light, no longer trembling. The lobby was quiet again, but this time it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence that comes after truth has spoken, and the room itself finally believes it. The clock on the wall marked 10:25 p.m., 22 minutes since the insult. Justice had only just begun to unfold. The crowd that had filled the lobby did not disperse. They stood still, unsure if they had just witnessed justice or something larger than that, something historical. The air carried a different weight now, a mix of awe and disbelief. Phones remained raised, recording every heartbeat of the moment. Aisha Carter did not look at the cameras. She was staring at Gregory Vance, whose once rigid posture had begun to collapse. His hands shook slightly as he stepped away from the front desk, the very command center he had ruled over for years. The marble beneath his shoes seemed to echo louder than ever before. Each sound was a reminder of the authority slipping through his fingers. Elena kept her eyes on Aisha, unable to look away. What she saw was not rage, it was control. Aisha's calm was precise, deliberate, like a conductor leading an orchestra without ever raising her hand. The entire room had started to move to her rhythm. The two police officers remained nearby, no longer part of the conflict but witnesses to its resolution. Officer Daniels whispered something to his partner, who nodded. Then both of them took slow steps toward the exit, understanding that the law was already being enforced by something greater than Badge's truth. Gregory cleared his throat, desperate to rebuild what he had lost. "Miss Carter," he began, his voice a trembling imitation of confidence. "I do not expect forgiveness, but please, allow me to explain." Aisha raised one hand, and he stopped. "Do not waste my time explaining what your tone already confessed," she said. Her words were not sharp, but they were unyielding. They cut through the room not as anger but as certainty. She turned to Elena. "What time did the incident begin?" Elena checked the system log. 10:03 p.m., Miss Carter. "And what time was the call placed to the police?" 10:05 p.m., Aisha nodded. "So in less than 2 minutes, you decided I was a criminal." Gregory's mouth opened, but she continued before he could speak. "That tells me this was not about evidence. It was about instinct. And that instinct is what destroys people who look like me before they are even allowed to speak." No one dared interrupt her. The chandelier light poured over her face, outlining every quiet truth in her expression. Aisha glanced toward the guests, many of whom had lowered their phones out of respect. "For those of you watching," she said, "remember this. Dignity does not shout. It does not need to. It endures, and eventually, it wins." Her voice was calm, but layered with history, the kind that reached beyond the walls of one hotel. She stepped closer to the counter and retrieved her ID and black titanium card, still lying untouched where she had placed them. "This," she said, holding them up, "was all it took for a man to forget his training, his policy, and his humanity." Gregory lowered his head. "I was only following protocol," he murmured. Aisha's reply was immediate. "No, Mr. Vance, you were following bias. The difference is that one protects order and the other destroys it." Elena closed her eyes for a moment, her shoulders shaking with the quiet weight of witnessing something she would never forget. Aisha turned to her. "Elena, what position do you hold here?" "Front desk clerk, ma'am," she said. "How long have you been with Horizon?" 3 years. Aisha nodded again. "You will not be leaving this hotel. By morning, you will be promoted to assistant manager, effective immediately." Elena gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Miss Carter, I thank you." "You earned it," Aisha said. "You spoke when it cost you something. That is what leadership means." The crowd began to murmur again, this time in approval. The energy had changed completely. The same lobby that had once radiated arrogance now hummed with respect. Gregory looked up, tears forming in his eyes. "Please," he said quietly, "I am begging you, do not destroy my career." Aisha studied him for a long moment. "You destroyed it yourself," she said. "All I did was tell the truth aloud." He bowed his head. "I am sorry." "I believe you," she said. "But apology does not erase consequence." Her phone vibrated again. She glanced at the screen. "Nia," she said, "confirm the status of the Horizon audit." "Enter," the voice in her earpiece replied, calm and professional. "Audit is active. Legal and human resources teams have joined the live stream. All evidence from the security cameras and employee accounts has been saved." Aisha nodded. "Thank you." The corporate monitors behind the counter flickered again, showing a blue screen with a statement, "Horizon Group does not tolerate discrimination in any form. All allegations under review." The guests began clapping softly. Even those who had been too afraid to intervene now felt compelled to show respect. Officer Daniels turned at the door and called back to Aisha. "Ma'am, if you need a written statement from us, we will provide it." "I already have one," Aisha said. "It is recorded in every camera and every conscience that was here tonight." The officers exchanged a glance and walked out quietly. The glass doors closed behind them, sealing the moment inside. Aisha turned back to Gregory. "You once told a guest, this place is not for people like you. Remember that sentence. Because starting tomorrow, this hotel will be exactly for people like me, people who earned it, people who were told no and built their own yes." Her tone never rose. It did not need to. Gregory stood silently, staring at the ground as if he could hide from the truth now burning in the marble reflection beneath his feet. The clock read 10:28 p.m., 25 minutes since the insult. Outside, the rain had started to fall against the glass walls, soft but steady, washing the night clean. Inside, the light of the chandelier no longer seemed cruel. It was warm again, as though the building itself had exhaled. Aisha looked around once more, her eyes calm, her voice certain. "Now let us rebuild this lobby into what it was meant to be, a place where everyone is welcome, and no one forgets why." Ugh. The words settled in the air like a closing chapter, but the story itself was only beginning to take its place in memory. The rain outside thickened, streaking the glass like a slow, deliberate applause from the night. Inside, the air was heavy but clear, the way it feels after a storm that has not yet ended. The guests were still there, some recording, some simply standing still, as if moving might break the fragile balance between justice and disbelief. Aisha Carter remained by the front desk, her yellow suit catching the dim gold from the chandelier above. She did not smile. Justice was not joy. It was gravity. It pressed down on everyone present, especially on those who had thought they understood power until they saw it wielded without a single shout. Gregory Vance stood behind the counter, eyes unfocused. The same counter he had guarded for 10 years now felt like a border between his past and the world that had just outgrown him. His badge sat on the marble, small and defeated. He reached for it once, then stopped, realizing it no longer belonged to him. Elena stood beside Aisha now, uncertain if she should speak. "Miss Carter," she began softly, "should I escort the guests upstairs? Maybe close the lobby for the night?" Aisha shook her head. "No, let them stay. Let them see what accountability looks like in daylight." "It is still night," Elena said, almost whispering. Aisha glanced at her watch. "Not for long." The digital clock behind the desk read 10:31 p.m., 28 minutes since the insult. From somewhere in the back, a voice rose, Lauren Hayes, the assistant manager. She had been watching the scene unfold from the hallway, frozen between loyalty and fear. Now, she stepped into the open, her heels clicking nervously against the marble. "Miss Carter," she said, "I did not agree with how he spoke to you, but I was following procedure. I was only—" Aisha turned toward her. "You were only silent," she said. "And silence is a choice." Lauren's breath caught. "I did not know who you were." "That should not have mattered," Aisha replied. "Courtesy is not supposed to depend on recognition." The crowd murmured again. Every word Aisha spoke rippled through the space, like sound through water, slow, measured, undeniable. Gregory finally found his voice. "You have made your point," he said, his tone a fragile mix of pride and panic. "You have embarrassed me enough. I will resign quietly, if that is what you want." Aisha faced him fully. "Embarrassment is temporary," she said. "Education is permanent. You are not leaving quietly. You are staying long enough to understand what you tried to destroy. Gregory's expression faltered. What do you mean? You will sit there, she said, pointing to one of the leather chairs in the lounge, and you will watch what happens next. That is your first lesson in humility. Ugh. He hesitated, but her gaze left no room for negotiation. Slowly, he walked over and sat down. The chair seemed to swallow him whole. Aisha turned back to Elena. Bring me the complaint file, she said. The internal log? Yes. Every report made by guests and employees in the past year. Elena opened a drawer behind the counter and retrieved a dark blue folder embossed with the hotel logo. She handed it over with trembling hands. Aisha flipped through the pages, dozens of printed incident reports, many of them stamped, dismissed in red. She read aloud. Guest reported racial slur from concierge January. Complaint dismissed. Her fingers turned another page. Employee reported gender discrimination. March. Dismissed. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Gregory rubbed his temple. Those reports were inconclusive. Aisha's tone was cold. No, they were inconvenient. She looked up from the file. Do you know what happens when leadership dismisses pain? It multiplies. Elena stood beside her, shoulders straight. There were times I wanted to speak up, she said quietly, but I thought it would cost me my job. And it might have, Aisha said. But tonight, silence costs more. The automatic doors hissed open. A man in a charcoal suit stepped inside, rain glistening on his shoulders. He was tall, mid-40s, carrying a sleek briefcase. His ID badge identified him as Marcus Lee, Regional Director, Horizon Group. He walked straight to Aisha, nodding with respect. Miss Carter, he said, corporate security is active on all channels. The board is watching the live feed. Do you want me to take over? Aisha shook her head. Not yet. They need to hear it from me. Marcus turned to Gregory, whose face had drained of color again. Mr. Vance, I hope you understand the magnitude of what you have done. Gregory's voice trembled. You made a mistake. Marcus's tone was sharp. You made a pattern, and now that pattern has a name. Aisha closed the folder, her fingers tapping lightly on the cover. We are not here to humiliate you, Mr. Vance, she said. We are here to expose a system that let you believe you were untouchable. The guests were silent again. Even the rain outside had quieted. She turned to Marcus. File the suspension notices. Lock all staff access for this shift except Miss Ruiz. Yes, ma'am, Marcus replied, already typing into his tablet. The monitors behind the desk flickered once more. Employee accounts were being disabled in real time. The sound of the keyboard was the rhythm of consequence. Gregory lowered his head, his voice a whisper. Why are you doing this here? Why in front of everyone? Aisha looked at him steadily. Because discrimination happens in public. Accountability should too. The sentence settled over the room like a final chord. Lauren's face crumpled. Miss Carter, please, I cannot lose this job. You will not lose it, Aisha said. You will earn it again. Starting tomorrow, you will attend Horizon's diversity and ethics retraining. You will listen, not to defend yourself, but to understand. And if you fail to complete it, you will be dismissed. Lauren nodded quickly, tears spilling over. Yes, ma'am. Aisha handed the blue folder to Marcus. Seal it. Forward every file to legal. He nodded again, closing the folder with a snap. Aisha looked around the lobby, then spoke to no one in particular. This place was built to offer comfort, but comfort without respect is just a luxury wrapped around ignorance. Tonight, that ends. For a long time, no one moved. The guests, the staff, even the air seemed to pause. Then a sound rose slow, deliberate applause. It started with one person near the elevator, then another, until the entire lobby was filled with the sound of hands meeting in rhythm with truth. The clock read 10:36 p.m., 33 minutes since the insult. The night had changed forever, and so had everyone inside that lobby. The applause faded into a silence that was almost reverent. The rain outside had slowed to a mist, coating the glass walls of the lobby with a silver sheen. The air smelled faintly of ozone and marble polish, clean but heavy. The clock above the front desk now read 10:39 p.m., 36 minutes since the insult that had turned a routine night into a moment of history. Aisha Carter stood at the center of the lobby, her composure untouched. Around her, the remaining staff lingered like ghosts of the old order, uncertain whether they should stay or disappear. The cameras on the guests' phones glowed softly, still recording, but no one dared to speak above a whisper. Marcus Lee, the regional director, had finished locking the staff accounts. His tablet screen now displayed a list of suspended employees. He handed it to Aisha. "Every account has been deactivated except Miss Ruiz's," he said quietly. "Corporate has approved full authority to proceed as you see fit." Aisha accepted the tablet, scanning the list. "Good," she said. "Now, let us see how deep this culture runs." Elena glanced at her nervously. "Do you want me to get the guest log?" Aisha nodded. "Yes. Bring every record of complaint filed in this branch during the past 12 months. Elena hurried to the back office. The sound of her shoes against the marble echoed sharply in the hush. Gregory Vance sat slumped in one of the leather lounge chairs, his face pale and rigid. The arrogance that once filled his posture had drained away, leaving behind only the thin outline of regret. Every now and then he looked toward the exit, as though the doors might open and let him walk out of this nightmare, but they stayed sealed. Lauren Hayes, the assistant manager, stood beside the counter, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She wanted to speak, but did not trust her voice. When Elena returned, she carried a stack of printed documents. She placed them on the counter in front of Aisha. "Here, ma'am, guest complaint reports for the year." Aisha thanked her and began leafing through them. Her expression did not change, but her silence grew heavier with each page. She read aloud. April 21st. Guest reported being ignored at check-in while others were greeted. Dismissed as misunderstanding. June 5th. Guest reported staff using the phrase company policy to avoid serving them. Dismissed. September 12th. Guest complained about being asked for additional ID when others were not. Dismissed. She stopped reading. The sound of paper against marble seemed louder than breathing. Marcus looked at the documents over her shoulder. "How many total dismissals?" 43. Aisha said softly. 43. Chances to change before tonight. Gregory spoke up, his voice thin. "I cannot personally review every report. The corporate system automatically—" "The system does not act alone," Aisha interrupted. "It reflects the people who run it. This is not a system error. This is a pattern of permission." Her words carried no anger, only truth. That made them heavier. Elena looked down at the stack of papers. "I remember some of these," she said. "I wanted to follow up, but I was told not to stir things up." "Who told you that?" Aisha asked. Elena hesitated. "Mostly Mr. Vance, sometimes the human resources officer." Aisha nodded. "Then you will help us rebuild the policy." Gregory leaned forward, desperate. "Please, Miss Carter, I will cooperate. I will attend any training, make any statement, just let me keep my position." Aisha regarded him with the same calm that had dismantled his authority piece by piece. "You cannot lead a place you do not respect," she said. "This hotel needs to be managed by people who see guests as human beings, not categories." Lauren's voice trembled as she finally spoke. "Miss Carter, I swear I am not like him. I just did not know what to do." Aisha turned to her. "Then learn. When you are faced with injustice and you do not act, you become part of it. But you can still change that, starting now." Lauren nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "Yes, ma'am." Aisha placed the documents back on the counter and faced the crowd. "Every person in this lobby has seen what happens when bias is mistaken for procedure. Do not let this moment end as a spectacle. Let it be a beginning." Her voice resonated through the marble, deep and clear. Because every institution, no matter how tall its walls or bright its lights, can fall if its foundation is prejudice. The guests remained silent, but many lowered their phones. Some even placed them down entirely, realizing they no longer needed to record. The truth no longer needed proof, it had already taken form in front of them. Marcus checked his tablet again. "Miss Carter, the board chair just joined the feed. They are asking for a status update." Aisha nodded. "Tell them the situation is contained, but the recovery has just begun." He sent the message without another word. Gregory's voice wavered. "Am I under arrest?" Aisha shook her head. "No, you are under accountability." Her tone was not cruel. It was exact. The rain outside began to ease, replaced by the faint hum of city traffic. Aisha looked up at the chandelier. "Do you know what light does, Mr. Vance?" she asked. "It reveals. It does not punish. It just shows what was already there." Gregory could not answer. She turned toward Elena again. "Send a memo to every Horizon branch," she said. Remind them that inclusion is not a department, it is a discipline. It must be practiced every hour by every person wearing this badge. Yes, ma'am, Elena said. Aisha glanced at the clock. 10:44 p.m., 41 minutes since the insult. Marcus looked at her with quiet respect. Would you like to conclude for the night? Aisha shook her head. Not yet. We are not finished until the truth is complete. She stepped forward into the middle of the lobby once more. The guests instinctively parted, creating a clear path toward the glass doors. She looked out into the city lights beyond the same skyline she had dreamed of as a teenager when hotels like this were worlds she was not allowed to enter. Her voice softened. When I was 16, a manager threw me out of a hotel just like this one. He said, "You do not belong here." Tonight, I am standing in the same kind of lobby, hearing the same words, but this time, I own the building. She turned back toward the room. That is what change looks like. No one moved. The sound of rain against glass became a rhythm beneath her final words. Remember this night, she said, because tomorrow, no one here will ever say again that they did not know what injustice looks like when it stands right in front of them. The chandelier's reflection shimmered in her eyes. The clock ticked once more, 10:45 p.m., 42 minutes since the insult. The night was still unfolding, and the lesson was not over yet. The hotel lobby had turned into a place where silence carried more power than applause. It was 10:47 p.m., 44 minutes since the insult, and yet the night felt suspended, stretched thin across the weight of what had already been said and what still needed to be heard. Outside, the rain softened into a drizzle, the sound faint and rhythmic, like quiet breath against glass. Inside, the lights hummed. The golden glow of the chandelier spilled across the polished marble, reflecting fragments of faces that had once looked away but now could not. Aisha Carter stood at the center of it all, still and steady, her calm holding the room together. Her voice had not risen once, yet everything in that lobby now revolved around it. She turned slightly, scanning the space, her eyes finding each person who had witnessed the humiliation unfold. The guests, the staff, the police officers who had since returned to ensure the night stayed orderly. She spoke softly but clearly. When truth is revealed, silence becomes dangerous. I hope none of you leave this place thinking that watching was enough. No one answered. Even Gregory Vance, now seated in the corner, avoided her gaze. His hands rested limply on his knees, and his name badge hung crooked, as if the weight of it had finally registered. Aisha continued. You all saw what happened. You saw a man raise his voice not because he was right, but because he was used to being obeyed. You saw a team follow his orders, not because they believed in him, but because they feared him. That is how injustice survives not by loud hatred, but by quiet agreement. Her tone carried no bitterness. It was the kind of calm that came from surviving something many times before. Marcus Lee stood beside her, arms folded, watching the room like a teacher taking attendance of conscience. Miss Carter, he said, corporate has confirmed that the footage from the security cameras matches the live stream feed. There is no dispute about what occurred tonight. Good, she replied. Then we have facts, and facts do not fade when the headlines do. She looked toward Elena, who stood near the front desk. Miss Ruiz, how many employees were on duty when this began? Elena checked the shift roster. 9, including Mr. Vance and myself. Aisha nodded. How many spoke up when he told me to leave? Elena's throat tightened. Only me, ma'am. Then tonight, Aisha said, 9 people will remember what one voice can do. She turned toward the group of staff who had slowly gathered near the side hallway, housekeepers, bellmen, night clerks. Some looked down. Others watched her with wide, nervous eyes. You were told to follow orders, she said, but there will come a time when the right thing will not sound like an order. That is when your character will speak louder than your training. One of the housekeepers, a middle-aged woman named Marisol, stepped forward hesitantly. Miss Carter, I wanted to help, she said, her accent gentle, but he was my boss. I could have lost my job. Aisha nodded. I understand. That is what power does when it is used wrong. It teaches fear. But after tonight, no one here will have to fear doing what is right. Tears welled in Marisol's eyes. She nodded and stepped back, whispering, Thank you. Aisha turned to Marcus. How long has Gregory Vance been managing this property? Marcus glanced at his tablet. 10 years, ma'am. Hired as assistant manager, promoted within 3. Aisha exhaled. 10 years of authority. How many promotions were given to people who looked like me? Marcos hesitated. None. The room fell silent again. Aisha looked back at Gregory. Do you remember the last person of color who applied for management here? Gregory's voice cracked. I do not recall. That is because you never saw them, she said. You never learned to look. He lowered his head, his reflection distorted in the marble floor. Marcus cleared his throat. Miss Carter, the board is requesting a public statement by midnight. Do you want to issue one? Aisha shook her head. Not yet. The truth is still happening. And her gaze drifted toward the glass doors where the reflection of the city lights shimmered like distant fireflies. Every building has a story, she said quietly. Some are built on steel and stone. Others are built on silence and submission. But eventually, every foundation is tested. Elena looked at her, eyes glistening. You built this one differently, didn't you? Aisha smiled faintly. I built it to be tested, because I knew one day someone like him would walk in and remind the world why it needed to exist. Gregory lifted his eyes, his voice barely audible. You planned this? No, Aisha said, but I was ready for it. The sentence hung in the air like a closing door. Marcus stepped forward, lowering his voice. Ma'am, we have been receiving calls from news outlets. The footage is already circulating online. What do you want to do? Aisha's expression did not change. Let it circulate, she said. Let them see that dignity does not shout to be heard. Lauren Hayes, the assistant manager, took a cautious step forward. Miss Carter, she said, I would like to apologize as well. I did not intervene because I thought it would only make things worse. Aisha looked at her. And did it? Lauren hesitated. No, ma'am. Then remember that, Aisha said. Silence never prevents conflict, it only delays justice. Laura nodded, tears forming in her eyes. Yes, ma'am. The clock behind the desk ticked again. 10:51 p.m., 48 minutes since the insult. Aisha glanced toward Marcus. Has legal confirmed the suspensions? Yes, they will arrive in the morning to process the terminations. Good, she said, because this is not just about firing people. It is about resetting an entire culture. She faced the remaining staff, her tone firm but calm. Tomorrow, this lobby will open again, and the first thing guests will see is not a chandelier or marble floor, it will be people. People who treat them as equals, not intruders. No one dared look away. The weight of her words filled the space completely. Aisha took one last look around the lobby, her eyes softening just slightly. The hardest part of rebuilding is not replacing what is broken, it is unlearning what was never true. Outside, a car passed, its headlights flashing across the glass like a slow camera pan. Inside, the lobby remained perfectly still. The clock struck 10:52 p.m., 49 minutes since the insult. And for the first time, the Horizon Grand felt like it belonged to everyone standing there. The lobby lights dimmed slightly as the night staff adjusted the system for closing hours, but no one moved toward the doors. It was 10:54 p.m., 51 minutes since the insult, and the world outside had faded into a soft reflection of streetlights and rain. Inside, the Horizon Grand felt both sacred and tense, as if it were holding its breath for the final lesson that no one wanted but everyone needed. Aisha Carter remained by the counter. Her phone vibrated with constant alerts, calls, emails, and messages flooding in from across the country, but she ignored them all. Tonight was not for the headlines. It was for the truth that too many people had learned to step around. Gregory Vance still sat in the lounge chair where she had told him to remain. The arrogance that had once defined his every movement had dissolved. He looked older now, smaller somehow, as if stripped of his certainty. He rubbed his forehead and whispered something to himself, maybe a prayer, maybe an excuse. Aisha's eyes moved to him only briefly. Then she turned toward the front desk staff who had gathered behind Elena. The night clerks, the bellman, the security guard who had first arrived late to the scene all stood frozen between fear and admiration. Tell me, Aisha said, her tone calm but absolute. What did you feel when you saw me being thrown out? The question hung heavy. No one answered at first. Aisha's voice softened. I am not asking what you thought. I am asking what you felt. A young security officer named James stepped forward. He looked barely 25. I felt wrong, he said quietly, but I was not sure if I was allowed to feel that way while on duty. Aisha nodded slowly. And that, she said, is how injustice survives. It does not need your hatred, James. It just needs your permission. His eyes lowered. Yes, ma'am. She turned to the rest of the group. And the rest of you? A housekeeper named Marisol spoke again, voice trembling but clear. I felt scared, she said, because I knew what was happening, and I also knew what would happen to me if I said something. You were right to be afraid, Aisha said gently. But after tonight, fear will no longer have a place here. If this hotel is to carry my name, it will also carry my principles. And those principles begin with courage. Elena looked around at her colleagues, then back at Aisha. Miss Carter, she said softly, may I ask something? Of course. Why did you come here tonight? You could have sent an assistant or a team. You could have arrived with cameras and press, but you came alone. Aisha paused before answering. Her gaze drifted upward to the chandelier, the same light that had illuminated her humiliation less than an hour ago. Because, she said slowly, I needed to see it for myself. I needed to know if the places I built had learned to welcome the people they once ignored. The silence that followed was different now. It was not fear, it was reverence. Gregory finally looked up. So this was a test, he said bitterly. Aisha turned toward him. No, she replied. It was a truth that revealed itself the moment you opened your mouth. He exhaled, his voice breaking. I was raised to believe respect had to be earned. Respect is not a currency, Aisha said. It is the starting point. You lost yours because you tried to spend what you never gave. Her words settled like dust on marble, soft, but impossible to ignore. Marcus Lee stepped closer, his voice low. Miss Carter, the board has confirmed that news networks are already requesting statements. Has your office drafted one? Aisha shook her head. There will be no statement tonight. Let the truth speak first. Tomorrow, we will respond with action, not commentary. He nodded. Understood. Elena took a step forward, her eyes glistening. Miss Carter, do you ever get tired of fighting this? Aisha's eyes softened. Every day, she said. But tired is not the same as finished. That answer lingered in the air long enough for every person to feel its weight. Then, unexpectedly, one of the guests, a woman who had been standing near the elevator this whole time, spoke up. Miss Carter, she said, I have been staying at Horizon Hotels for years. I have always felt safe here. But tonight I realized I was safe because someone else was not. Aisha turned to her. Then you have already learned what most people never do, she said. Safety built on someone else's fear is not safety at all. It is privilege disguised as peace. The woman nodded, her eyes wet. Thank you, she whispered. The lobby lights flickered once, the building system signaling the end of check-in hours. Aisha looked up at the clock. 10:57 p.m., 54 minutes since the insult. Marcus's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, then at Aisha. Corporate has requested authorization to close the live stream feed, he said. Aisha shook her head. Leave it open. People need to see how truth ends, not just how it begins. The faint glow of recording lights reflected on the marble floors. The world was still watching, somewhere beyond the glass and the rain. Gregory's voice came again, quiet, broken. I have nothing left to say. Aisha nodded once. Then listen. She stepped closer to the center of the room. Every person in this lobby carries a lesson from tonight. For some of you, it is courage. For others, humility. For all of you, it is proof that silence has consequences. She paused, letting the words stretch through the air. You have seen what power looks like when it chooses restraint. I did not shout, I did not threaten, and yet everything changed. That is what dignity can do when it is no longer asking for permission. Elena's lips parted in awe. Marcus stood still, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. The guests, one by one, began lowering their phones, realizing the story no longer needed witnesses, it needed believers. The chandelier's glow softened, scattering across the marble in quiet fragments of gold. Aisha looked toward the exit, her reflection merging with the city lights beyond the glass. We all leave fingerprints on the places we build, she said. Tonight, mine are on this floor, and they will stay here long after the noise fades. The clock ticked again, 10:58 p.m., 55 minutes since the insult. The storm had passed, but the night was still alive, carrying the sound of a truth that refused to be forgotten. The clock struck 11 o'clock exactly. 57 minutes since the insult. The sound of the second hand sweeping across the face of the clock seemed to echo through the lobby louder than it should have. The Horizon Grand had gone completely still. Even the air conditioning felt muted, as if the building itself were listening. The police officers had returned to the doorway, no longer there to enforce but to observe. Aisha Carter stood where the confrontation had begun, her posture calm, her eyes steady, her authority absolute. Around her, the staff and guests formed an invisible circle, a courtroom of witnesses, each one forced to confront what they had just learned about themselves. Marcus Lee stood nearby, tablet in hand, giving soft updates. Corporate legal is online. The official suspension documents are being processed. Media outlets have started calling this the Horizon Grand Incident. Aisha did not flinch. "Let them name it however they need to," she said. "I did not come here for headlines. I came here for proof." Her gaze moved to Gregory Vance, still seated in the corner. His face was drawn, his eyes hollow. The authority that had once animated him had dissolved entirely, leaving behind only a man surrounded by his own echoes. His hands twisted the edge of his uniform jacket like a nervous child clinging to a blanket. He whispered, "Miss Carter, what happens to me now?" Aisha looked at him for a long time before answering. "That depends," she said, "on what you do next. Do you hide from the truth, or do you carry it with you?" Gregory swallowed hard. "I want to make things right." You cannot undo what you have done," Aisha said evenly. "But you can help rebuild what you tried to destroy." He lifted his head slightly. "How?" "By listening," she said. "Not just to me, but to every person you have ignored for 10 years. When you leave this hotel, you will not be the man who ran it. You will be the man who was corrected by it. Learn from that." Gregory's eyes glistened. "I will." "Good," Aisha replied, "because your apology is not measured by your words. It will be measured by what you change after this night." The sentence lingered like smoke in the air. Elena took a careful step forward, her voice quiet but firm. "Miss Carter," she said, "what will happen to the rest of the staff?" Aisha turned to her. "They will be evaluated," she said. "Those who participated in wrongdoing will face consequences. Those who stood silent will be trained, and those who spoke will lead." Elena nodded, eyes wide. "Thank you." Aisha gave a slight smile. "No, Miss Ruiz. Thank yourself. You chose courage when it cost something. That is rare." The young woman's throat tightened as she blinked away tears. From the far side of the lobby, one of the guests spoke up. It was the same woman who had earlier realized her own comfort came at someone else's expense. "Miss Carter," she said, "I recorded everything. I was going to post it, but now I do not know if I should. Would you prefer that I delete it?" Aisha looked at her with calm understanding. "Keep it," she said, "but do not post it for outrage. Post it for reflection. Let it remind people that prejudice does not always shout it off and smiles while it excludes." The woman nodded slowly, holding her phone like something sacred. Marcus stepped closer. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "we have confirmed the media vans outside. The press is waiting for a statement before they leave." Aisha exhaled, her tone steady. "Then they can wait a little longer." Her gaze drifted toward the ceiling where the chandelier's light glimmered softly across the marble. "There is one more thing I need to say before this night ends." The entire room stilled again. She looked at the guests, the staff, the officers, every witness to the moment. "You have seen how quickly dignity can be mistaken for defiance, how easily calm can be misread as arrogance. But remember this, every time a person like me stands quietly in a storm like this, we are not enduring it. We are studying it. We are memorizing who stayed silent and who spoke." Her voice lowered, but it grew sharper. "And one day, when that silence costs you something, you will remember this room." The weight of her words pressed on every chest in the room. Even the officers stood straighter, their eyes fixed on her. She continued, "I do not want your sympathy. I want your awareness. Because awareness is the seed of change, and if you do not plant it now, you will keep growing the same tree of ignorance over and over again." A pause followed. No one dared to breathe too loudly. Aisha walked slowly toward the counter, the same spot where Gregory had humiliated her less than an hour earlier. She placed both hands on the cool marble surface. Her fingers traced the faint reflection of the chandelier above. "This counter," she said quietly, "is where I was told I did not belong. But the truth is, I built this counter. I chose the stone. I chose the light. I chose everything about this place. And yet, it took one sentence from a stranger to make people believe I did not deserve to stand here." She looked up, her voice rising slightly, not in anger but in strength. That is the cost of prejudice. It steals belonging from the very people who created the space to begin with. Gregory's head sank lower into his hand. Aisha turned back to the guests. So when you leave tonight, do not say you witnessed a scandal. Say you witnessed a correction. Say you saw a woman hold her silence until the truth spoke for her. The woman near the elevator wiped her tears. A man near the doors whispered, "Amen." Aisha stepped back from the counter, her presence filling the room without effort. "This is no longer about a hotel," she said. "It is about every room where someone was told they did not belong, and if this building stands for anything, it will stand as proof that silence can be powerful when it serves justice instead of fear." The lobby fell into one final silence, thick, reverent, complete. The clock above the desk clicked once more, 11:03 p.m., 60 minutes since the insult. And for the first time since the night began, the Horizon Grand was exactly what it was always meant to be, a place where truth checked in and discrimination was finally checked out. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving behind the faint smell of wet asphalt and clean air drifting through the automatic doors. The city outside had gone quiet, its heartbeat softened under the glow of streetlights. Inside the Horizon Grand, the silence carried a different rhythm, steady, deliberate, and full of meaning. It was 11:05 p.m., 62 minutes since the insult that had fractured the night and rebuilt it again. Aisha Carter stood alone in the center of the lobby. The crowd that had surrounded her had stepped back, giving her space as if instinctively aware that something deeper was about to unfold. She was no longer confronting anyone. She was standing inside a quiet that demanded attention. The marble floor beneath her caught the reflection of the chandelier, creating two versions of her, one solid, one mirrored. The woman above the floor was power contained. The one reflected below was pain remembered. Together, they were truth. Marcus Lee watched her closely. He had worked with executives all his life, but he had never seen a leader hold silence like it was a weapon. No boardroom training, no corporate manual had prepared him for this kind of authority. Aisha finally spoke, but her tone was low, nearly a whisper. "Do you hear that?" No one responded. "That," she said softly, "is the sound of consequence. It does not scream, it waits." The lobby lights dimmed slightly as the building's automated system adjusted to night mode. The chandelier's glow softened, leaving a halo of golden warmth over her shoulders. Elena stood near the counter, her eyes full of awe and confusion. "Miss Carter," she said quietly, "are you all right?" Aisha's gaze stayed fixed ahead. "I am more than all right," she said. "I am present." Her tone carried the kind of calm that only comes from enduring too many storms. Gregory Vance was still in the corner chair, his posture broken, his eyes glassy. His voice cracked when he spoke. "I do not understand how you can stand there after everything I said." Aisha turned toward him slowly. "Because I have stood through worse," she said. "You saw an inconvenience in front of your desk. I saw a memory trying to repeat itself." He frowned, not understanding. She took a few steps closer. "When I was 16 years old," she said, "I stood in another lobby just like this one. Different name, different city, same tone. A man told me I could not sit in the waiting area because it was for paying guests only. My father worked in that hotel as a bellman. He was standing 3 feet away, but he could not defend me. If he had, he would have lost his job. So he lowered his eyes and pretended not to see me." The words drew the room tighter. Even the faint hum of the air system felt muted now. Aisha's voice did not tremble. "That night, I promised myself that I would build a place where no one would ever have to lower their eyes again, a place where silence would not mean surrender." Her eyes locked onto Gregory's. "And yet, here we are." He swallowed hard, unable to look away. Elena felt her throat tighten. "Miss Carter, was this hotel that place?" Aisha nodded once. "Yes, this was supposed to be the proof that we had evolved, but tonight reminded me that buildings cannot change people. Only people can change people." Marcus took a slow breath. "Then maybe this is where that change finally starts." Aisha looked at him, her expression softening slightly. "Maybe," she said, "but change always demands a price." She turned toward the clock above the counter. "It is 11:08 p.m. The night is nearly over, but the lesson is not." Her phone buzzed once in her hand. She glanced down and read the message. Then she looked up, her face composed but unreadable. "Naya just confirmed it," she said. Every Horizon branch across the country is watching the live feed. Managers, directors, staff. They have all seen what happened here. Ugh. Gasps rippled through the room. Marcus blinked. All of them? Aisha nodded. All of them. Elena's hands flew to her mouth. That means this was not just about one hotel, Aisha said. This was a mirror held up to an entire system. The guests exchanged uneasy glances. The magnitude of what had happened was sinking in. Gregory whispered, "You planned this." Aisha looked at him. "No, but I have been ready for it my whole life." She turned back to Marcus. "Send out the official statement. Not to the media, to our employees." "What should it say?" he asked. "Write this," she said slowly. "Tonight, Horizon Group learned that discrimination cannot hide behind procedure. Every act of bias, no matter how small, is an act of disloyalty to the values we stand for. Effective immediately, every manager will complete bias response certification, and every guest will be treated as if they own the building, because in some way, they do." Marcus typed as she spoke, his fingers flying across the tablet. Aisha continued, "End it with this. Leadership is not about the power to decide who belongs. It is about the responsibility to make sure everyone does." He finished typing and nodded. Sent. The sound of the message delivery pinged softly, echoing like a small bell through the silence. Aisha turned to the staff one last time. "You will remember tonight as the night the lights stayed on," she said, "because ignorance thrives in the dark. But knowledge always demands illumination." She looked up again at the chandelier. Its crystals refracted light in every direction, scattering small reflections across the marble floor. "Look at that," she said quietly. "Every reflection comes from the same source, but each one shines differently. That is what equality should look like." Elena whispered, "It is beautiful." "It always was," Aisha said. "We just forgot how to see it." Oh, the lobby fell silent again, this time in peace rather than tension. The energy had shifted. What began as humiliation had become history, unfolding in real time. The clock struck 11:10 p.m. 67 minutes since the insult. Aisha exhaled slowly and whispered, "Now let them see what rebuilding really looks like." Her voice lingered in the air, steady and final, as the city outside began to breathe again. The Horizon Grand was no longer just a hotel. It had become a symbol, one built from silence, broken by truth, and held together by dignity. The clock read 11:12 p.m. 69 minutes since the insult, and the Horizon Grand no longer felt like a hotel. It felt like a cathedral of reckoning. The air itself seemed to hum with quiet conviction, every molecule charged by what had unfolded. The guests stood where they were, unable to leave. No one wanted to break the stillness that had taken hold. Aisha Carter remained beneath the chandelier, her calm unshaken. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from her assistant, Nia. The text was simple. "Protocol 6 is ready." Aisha looked at it for a moment before sliding the phone back into her jacket pocket. Then she lifted her gaze toward Marcus Lee, who stood a few steps away, still holding the corporate tablet. "Marcus," she said quietly, "it is time." He nodded, understanding immediately. "Are you sure you want to initiate it tonight?" "Yes," Aisha said. "Tonight, while the memory is still alive, Protocol 6 was not designed for comfort, it was designed for change." He took a slow breath, his fingers hovering over the screen. "Very well, ma'am." Aisha turned toward the crowd. "For those of you who do not know," she began, "Protocol 6 is an emergency initiative I created 2 years ago after a different incident in another city. It allows me to trigger an internal audit of all staff communications, guest records, and security footage within any Horizon property where discrimination is suspected." Gasps rippled through the lobby. She continued, her voice steady. "When I built this network, I told the board we would need a system that could speak truth even when people refused to. They agreed. Tonight, we are activating that system." Marcus entered a code into his tablet. The monitors behind the front desk flickered to life again, glowing blue with the Horizon Group insignia. The words Protocol 6, Verification in Progress appeared in bold white letters across every screen. A soft hum filled the room as the hotel's systems began to sync. The lobby lights dimmed slightly as the data servers in the building's lower levels came online. A few guests gasped, clutching their phones as the glow from the monitors washed across their faces. Gregory Vance sat up abruptly. What is happening? Aisha turned her gaze toward him. The truth is happening, she said. Everything you have ever written, approved, or ignored within this hotel will be reviewed. Every guest complaint you buried, every internal message you dismissed, it will all surface now. He looked horrified. You cannot do that. That is invasion of privacy. Aisha's voice was calm. No, Mr. Vance. That is accountability. Privacy protects individuals. Transparency protects institutions. Marcus turned to her. Audit sequence confirmed. Estimated completion in 12 minutes. She nodded. Good. While we wait, let us talk about why this had to happen. Her voice lowered, almost intimate. When power loses empathy, it becomes cruelty dressed as order. That is what happened here tonight. But this building will not carry that legacy any longer. Elena stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. Miss Carter, she said, does this mean everyone here will be investigated? Yes, Aisha said, including myself. Equality without self-examination is hypocrisy. The answer stunned the crowd. A few people began to applaud softly, the sound hesitant but sincere. Aisha looked around at the guests. Each of you came here tonight expecting luxury. You paid for comfort, but comfort has a cost. It should never come at the expense of someone else's dignity. A man near the elevator spoke up. Miss Carter, do you think things will really change after this? Aisha met his eyes. Change is not a feeling. It is a discipline, and discipline requires repetition. After tonight, no one who works here will be able to pretend they do not know better. The screens behind her began displaying data in real-time emails, training reports, security logs, and communication transcripts. The scrolling text moved too quickly to read, but the implication was clear. The hotel was confessing its own history. Gregory leaned forward, staring in disbelief. This is madness, he muttered. No, Aisha said softly. This is truth with a timestamp. Marcus's voice broke through the tension. Ma'am, I am seeing multiple red flags already. There are unreported incidents, several involving racial bias and guest complaints ignored. Show them, Aisha said. He tapped a button, and one of the monitors switched to display excerpts from internal emails. The crowd gasped as messages appeared. Handle the complaint quietly. Guests like that are always looking for trouble. Follow standard procedure. No escalation. Aisha's voice was level but cold. There it is. The tone of denial. The language of discrimination disguised as professionalism. Gregory covered his face with his hands. Please, make it stop. Aisha's eyes softened slightly, but her tone remained firm. This is what it feels like when the truth finally gets the microphone. The scrolling stopped. The words audit complete. Violations confirmed filled the screen in bold white letters. The hum of the servers faded. The lobby fell silent again. Aisha turned to Marcus. Save the full report. Forward it to Human Resources and the board. Yes, ma'am, he said. Elena exhaled shakily. Miss Carter, what happens now? Now, Aisha said, we rebuild. She stepped forward, looking directly at the remaining staff. Tomorrow morning, every employee in this building will receive mandatory training on equality and guest respect. But more than that, I will personally oversee the implementation of Horizon's new mentorship program. People like me will not just visit these hotels, we will lead them. The guests began clapping softly again, their faces illuminated by the glow of the monitors. Gregory's voice broke through, faint and hoarse. What about me? Aisha looked at him for a long moment. You will be given the report too, she said. Not to defend yourself, but to read. Every line, every name, every incident you ignored. When you finish, you will understand why this had to happen. He nodded slowly, defeated. Aisha turned toward the lobby doors. The glass was fogged slightly from the cool night air. Beyond it, the city lights shimmered like distant witnesses. Tonight, she said, we did not just catch prejudice, we caught its reflection. And once you see that reflection, you cannot unsee it. She paused, her eyes sweeping across the room. The world will remember this night. But I want you all to remember something else. Justice does not need a camera. It needs courage. The chandelier flickered once, then steadied. The clock read 11:24 p.m., 71 minutes since the insult. The building, the people, and the truth all stood still, held in the quiet that comes only after something irreversible has happened. The clock on the wall read 11:26 p.m., 73 minutes since the insult, and yet the night still carried the electricity of something unfinished. The lobby was no longer a place of accusation, but a sanctuary of awakening. The air had changed. Even the faint scent of coffee from the nearby bar felt sharper, as though the building itself had inhaled truth for the first time in years. The monitors behind the counter still glowed blue, their light casting reflections across the marble floor. The words, "Audit complete, violations confirmed," lingered like an afterimage, haunting and liberating at the same time. Aisha Carter stood quietly, her back straight, her presence unwavering. She looked toward the glass doors, where the reflection of the city shimmered a reminder that the world outside was already watching. News crews had begun to gather beyond the entrance, their silhouettes faint in the reflection of the glass. But Aisha did not turn toward them. Her focus remained here, inside this moment, inside this truth. Marcus Lee approached her, tablet still in hand. His voice was low. "Ma'am, the board chair has asked if you would like to issue a press statement before midnight." Aisha shook her head. "No press. Not yet." "But the networks are already outside," Marcus said. "They are preparing live coverage." "Let them wait," she replied. "If I speak now, it will become a spectacle, and I am not interested in spectacle. I am interested in consequence." Marcus nodded silently. Aisha turned her attention to the staff still gathered near the front desk. Their faces were pale, a mixture of shame, confusion, and awakening. The fear that had ruled them earlier was gone, replaced by something heavier, awareness. She spoke softly. "You have all seen what happens when silence leads," she said. "Now you will see what happens when accountability follows." No one dared to move. Elena Ruiz stood beside her, trembling slightly. "Miss Carter," she said, "I never imagined a night like this could happen in my workplace." Aisha looked at her. "That is because most people do not imagine justice until it arrives uninvited." Elena swallowed. "What will you do with the report?" Aisha's eyes flicked toward the monitors. "It will stay open. Every manager across the Horizon Group will read it before sunrise. I want them to feel the weight of it. I want them to know that silence is now an action, and actions have consequences." Marcus looked up. "You mean all 12 regions?" "All 12, she said. "If prejudice can spread quietly, then so can accountability." The lobby lights dimmed again as the night shift automation began shutting down the unused hallways. The hotel was preparing for rest, but no one inside could think of sleep. Gregory Vance remained in his seat, head bowed, his fingers tracing invisible patterns on his knees. The manager who had once ruled this lobby with arrogance now looked like a man studying the ruins of his own authority. Aisha turned to him. "Do you understand what happened tonight?" He nodded weakly. "Yes, Miss Carter, I do." "No," she said, her tone calm but cutting. "You understand what happened to you. I am asking if you understand what happened to us." He looked up, puzzled. Aisha continued. "You saw a black woman and thought you were protecting your company, but what you were really protecting was your prejudice. And when prejudice wears a uniform, it calls itself policy." Gregory blinked, his throat tight. "I thought I was doing my job." "You were," Aisha said. "That is the tragedy." The words landed like quiet thunder. Elena stepped forward slightly. "Miss Carter," she said softly, "what made you come here tonight in person? You could have sent anyone. You could have hidden behind the brand." Aisha smiled faintly. "Because you cannot change a system from behind its walls. You have to walk through its front door and let it tell you who it really is." Her gaze drifted toward the marble counter where it had all begun. The same spot where she had stood, accused of fraud and trespassing, less than 90 minutes ago. "And tonight," she said, "it told me everything I needed to know." The chandelier above flickered once, scattering golden reflections across her face. She reached up slightly, as if feeling the warmth of its light. "When I built this company, I wanted every lobby to shine like this one," she said quietly. "But I forgot something important. Light is only beautiful when it touches everyone the same way." Marcus's voice broke the silence. "Ma'am, corporate has confirmed that social media feeds are trending with your name and the incident. The world knows now." Aisha exhaled slowly. "Then let the world watch," she said. "Let them see that dignity does not come with a discount. It comes with discipline." Elena looked toward the monitors, her eyes glistening. "Miss Carter, can I say something?" Aisha nodded. "Of course." Elena took a deep breath. "I think everyone in this room learned something tonight. Some of us learned courage. Some learned humility. But I think we all learned what silence really costs." Aisha's expression softened. "That is exactly right," she said. "Silence is not neutral. It is a decision. And tonight, we decided to break it." A ripple of emotion moved through the staff. No one clapped, no one cried out, but the feeling was tangible, a shared understanding, fragile yet fierce. Aisha looked at Gregory one last time. "You said earlier that respect must be earned. You were right about that. But tonight, you learned something more important. So must forgiveness." He lowered his head again, unable to speak. The glass doors hissed open suddenly as the first gust of fresh air from outside swept through the lobby. A reporter's voice called from the sidewalk, "Miss Carter, can you make a statement?" She turned but did not walk toward the cameras. Instead, she spoke loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. "This is my statement," she said. "Tonight, a man tried to remove me from a place I built. But what he did not know was that I did not come here to check in. I came here to check the system, and it failed its test. But tomorrow it begins again." Her voice echoed through the lobby, clear and unflinching. "Every person watching, every person recording, remember this. Justice is not a headline. It is a habit, and habits must be practiced daily until fairness becomes instinct and dignity becomes routine." She turned back toward the crowd. "The next time someone says, 'You do not belong here,' you look them in the eye and say, 'That is because you built it wrong.'" The room went still. Outside, the rain began again, light and rhythmic, tapping against the glass like applause from the night itself. The clock struck 11:30 p.m., 77 minutes since the insult. And for the first time, the Horizon Grand truly felt like it belonged to everyone. The lobby lights dimmed again, switching into night mode. The soft glow from the chandelier cascaded in golden threads across the marble floor, catching the faint movement of rain through the glass walls. Outside, the sound was gentle but constant, a quiet rhythm of renewal. It was 11:33 p.m., 80 minutes since the insult, and though the night was almost over, the story of it had just begun to take root in the hearts of everyone still standing there. Aisha Carter moved slowly toward the glass doors. Each step echoed through the space, deliberate and grounded. Her heels struck the marble with a sound that felt ceremonial. She stopped just short of the entrance, where her reflection met hers, the woman she had always been, and the one the world finally saw tonight. Behind her, Marcus Lee checked his tablet again. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "the board chair has just issued a directive. They are calling an emergency meeting for 7 a.m. to address corporate policy across all Horizon branches. They want your presence at headquarters." Aisha did not turn around. Her gaze remained fixed on the city outside. "I will be there," she said. "But they will not hear a speech from me. They will hear a plan." Marcus nodded. "Understood." Elena Ruiz stepped closer to her. "Miss Carter, do you think this will really change things?" Aisha's eyes softened. "Change is not a moment, Elena. It is a decision we must renew every day. Tonight was not the end of something. It was the proof that we are capable of beginning again." Elena nodded slowly, her expression full of wonder. "I never realized how much silence could weigh until tonight." Aisha turned to her. "That is the hardest truth to carry. Silence feels lighter than confrontation, but it breaks you faster." Behind them, Gregory Vance still sat where he had fallen into reflection. His shoulders were hunched, and his once crisp uniform now looked deflated, hanging from him like a costume that no longer fit. He stared at the floor, eyes unfocused. He spoke, voice quiet and raw. "Miss Carter," he said, "I spent years enforcing rules I thought were fair. I followed every policy, every protocol, but I never once asked who wrote them or who they protected." Aisha faced him. "That question," she said, "is where most change begins. When you stop asking, 'What am I allowed to do?' and start asking, 'What is right to do?' you stop being a manager and start becoming a leader." He nodded, the movement slow, heavy. "I understand that now." "I hope you do," she said softly, "because understanding without transformation is just regret dressed as wisdom." The line hung in the air like the toll of a slow bell. Marcus's voice came again, measured and respectful. "Ma'am, we have just received confirmation. All 12 regional directors are online. They are requesting your permission to distribute the footage of tonight's event for internal ethics training." Aisha hesitated for only a second. "No editing, no commentary," she said. "Let them see everything. The insult, the silence, the consequence. Truth loses its power when it is filtered." Marcus nodded. Understood. Aisha's phone buzzed again. She took it out, glanced at the message, and then smiled faintly. It has started, she murmured. Elena tilted her head. What has? Aisha turned toward her. The shift, she said. I just received word that staff from other Horizon hotels are sending messages, letters of apology, letters of promise. They are talking about what they will change in their own branches. That is the sound of a system beginning to wake up. Elena smiled, the exhaustion in her eyes replaced by something like pride. You made them listen. Aisha shook her head. No, I made them look. Listening will come later when the echo of this night stops haunting them. Gregory exhaled shakily. I do not know how to face my staff tomorrow. You start with truth, Aisha said. You tell them what you learned tonight, not to save your job, but to rebuild your integrity. He blinked at her, surprised. You are giving me a chance? She nodded once. Everyone deserves one chance to learn, Mr. Vance, but only one. Tears welled in his eyes as he whispered, Thank you. Aisha's gaze did not soften, but her tone did. Do not thank me. Earn it. The rain outside thickened again, a soft percussion against the glass. Aisha walked back toward the center of the lobby. The marble gleamed beneath her, reflecting her every step. When she reached the counter, she rested her hand on the surface that had once been the site of her humiliation. Now, it was her podium. She spoke not just to those in the room, but to the building itself. Tonight, this place became more than a hotel. It became a mirror, and every person who stands in it will have to decide what reflection they leave behind. Elena whispered, You sound like my grandmother. Aisha smiled faintly. That is because wisdom never changes, only the audience does. A quiet laugh rippled through the room. It was the first sound of relief anyone had dared to make since the night began. Aisha glanced at the clock. 11:38 p.m., she said softly. 85 minutes since the insult. I think that is long enough for shame to learn something. Marcus chuckled quietly under his breath. Aisha turned to him. Prepare a full transparency report for corporate. Include the audit results, the footage, and a written statement from every employee who was on duty tonight. I want accountability written in ink, not memory. Yes, ma'am. Also, she added, schedule a public apology event for tomorrow evening in this lobby. Same time, same place. Let the world see what humility looks like when it finally arrives. Marcus looked at her with admiration. It will be done. Aisha took one final look around the lobby, the polished marble, the chandelier, the faces of those who would never see this place the same way again. Tomorrow, this building will open its doors again, she said. But tonight, it closes its eyes to remember. Outside, lightning flashed once across the city skyline, followed by distant thunder rolling through the clouds. It felt like the world itself was bearing witness. Aisha's voice, lowered to a whisper, meant only for herself. My father could not speak that night when I was 16, but tonight I spoke for him. The clock ticked again, 11:40 p.m., 87 minutes since the insult. And somewhere between the rain and the hum of the chandelier, the Horizon Grand exhaled, as if the building itself understood what redemption sounded like. It was 11:42 p.m., 89 minutes, since the insult, and the Horizon Grand stood in a quiet that felt almost sacred. The lobby, which had witnessed humiliation, confrontation, and revelation, now rested in the kind of silence that comes only after truth has been spoken aloud. The chandelier still glowed above like a suspended sun, casting slow ripples of gold across the marble floor. Aisha Carter remained in the center of that glow. She had not moved for several minutes. Her stillness commanded more attention than any speech could have. Around her, the guests and staff lingered like people standing at the edge of a monument they did not fully understand. Outside, through the glass walls, flashes from cameras glimmered faintly as reporters waited for her to appear. But Aisha stayed where she was. Her fight tonight was not with the media, it was with history itself. Marcus Lee approached carefully, his tablet now tucked under his arm. Ma'am, he said quietly, security has confirmed that the press is still waiting. They will not leave until they hear from you. Aisha's tone was calm. Then they will learn patience. Truth does not operate on their schedule. Yes, ma'am. She turned her gaze toward the remaining staff. Some were standing together, whispering quietly. Others avoided her eyes entirely, still processing what had unfolded. The marble floor, polished to perfection, reflected their faces back at them like a mirror showing not who they were, but who they had been. Aisha spoke softly. "Every person here has two versions of themselves," she said. "The one who walked into this building and the one who will walk out. Which one you choose to carry forward will define what this night means to you." Endel. Her voice was calm, but it resonated through the lobby like a low drumbeat. Elena Ruiz stood closest to her, still holding the guest log in her trembling hands. "Miss Carter," she said, "what will happen to this place now? To all of us?" Aisha met her eyes. "This hotel will become a model," she said. "Every mistake here will be rewritten as a policy of prevention. Every act of silence will be studied until it becomes an act of courage." Elena nodded, blinking fast to hold back tears. "I want to be part of that." "You already are," Aisha said. "The moment you chose truth over comfort, you became the standard this company should follow." From the lounge corner, Gregory Vance spoke, his voice fragile but sincere. "Miss Carter," he said, "I do not know if there is anything left I can say that matters, but I need you to know something." Aisha turned to face him. "Go ahead." He stood slowly, straightening his jacket out of habit, though it no longer carried authority. "When I started working here," he said, "I thought the rules protected us, that they were written to keep things in order. But tonight, I realized they were written to keep people like me comfortable. I thought I was serving the company. I was really serving my fear." Aisha studied him for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "Fear is a poor employer, Mr. Vance. It pays only in regret." He nodded once, tears beginning to form. "You are right, and if there is ever a way to make this right, I will take it." "There is only one way," Aisha replied. "Do not defend yourself. Redeem yourself, not through words, but through the next choice you make." He looked down, his voice barely audible. "I understand." Aisha turned back toward the others. "Let this be a lesson you do not forget," she said. "Power does not corrupt by accident. It corrupts by habit. The habit of dismissing, of excusing, of assuming. Every time someone is treated as less, a piece of the institution rots. And tonight, we cut that piece out." Marcus stepped forward slightly. "Ma'am," he said, "corporate has just released a memo confirming your directive for a full equity review across all branches. The internal message has already been viewed by over 5,000 employees." Aisha nodded. "Good. Let them see what accountability looks like when it does not hide behind apologies." "Oh," Elena whispered, "they are calling you the Iron Voice online." Aisha smiled faintly. "Then let it remind them that steel does not have to shout to be strong." The room remained still. Even the guests who had planned to leave stayed rooted, unwilling to walk away before this night reached its final breath. Aisha's phone buzzed again. She looked down, read the message from Nia, and then looked up with quiet conviction. "Corporate has approved tomorrow's public apology," she said. "But we are not calling it an apology event. We are calling it a restoration." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Restoration?" "Yes," Aisha said. "Because what was broken was not just reputation, it was respect. And respect must be rebuilt in public, the same way it was destroyed." Elena nodded slowly, understanding. "You want everyone to see it happen. I want everyone to feel it happen," Aisha corrected gently. "Shame only works when it stays hidden. But when accountability steps into the light, it becomes leadership." The words filled the air like scripture. Gregory lowered his head, whispering to himself, "Leadership." Aisha turned to him again. "You wanted to lead this hotel, Mr. Vance. Now you will, but as an example. Tomorrow, you will stand beside me during the restoration. Not as the accused, but as the accountable. You will look into the same cameras that recorded your failure, and you will speak the truth out loud." Gregory froze. "You want me to—" "Yes," she interrupted softly, "because hiding from your mistakes teaches nothing, but confronting them teaches everyone." He hesitated, then nodded. "I will do it." "Good," she said. "Then perhaps this building will remember you not for your arrogance, but for your growth." The chandelier above flickered once, then steadied, as though approving the words. Aisha looked around the lobby one last time. The marble gleamed again, as if polished by redemption itself. The faces that had once been filled with judgment were now marked by humility. She stepped closer to the counter, resting her fingertips against the cold surface. "When I was told to leave this lobby, I thought of walking away," she said quietly. "But something in me refused, because if I left, I would have let ignorance win another night. Her voice grew softer, yet stronger. So I stayed. And because I stayed, you all will never forget this night. Not as a scandal, but as a turning point. The clock on the wall clicked softly. 11:49 p.m., 96 minutes since the insult. Aisha turned toward the glass doors. The rain had slowed again, each droplet catching the streetlight like a pearl falling through darkness. She looked back at the room one final time and said, "Tomorrow, the doors of the Horizon Grand will open again. But they will not open to guests, they will open to truth." And with that, she walked toward the glass, her reflection merging with the city lights beyond, leaving behind a silence that felt like the sound of justice breathing. It was 11:51 p.m., 98 minutes since the insult, and the rain outside had turned into a mist, so fine it seemed to float rather than fall. The city beyond the glass glowed faintly under the sodium lights, alive yet subdued. Inside the Horizon Grand, everything remained still. The tension that had filled the lobby earlier had transformed into something deeper, reverence. The kind that follows after a storm has revealed what needed to be washed away. Aisha Carter stood near the glass wall, her reflection layered with the city lights behind it. She looked neither victorious nor vengeful. She simply looked complete, like a storm that had done its work, and now stood quietly, watching the aftermath. Marcus Lee approached from behind, his shoes making soft clicks on the marble floor. "Ma'am," he said, keeping his voice low, "corporate just confirmed that tomorrow's event will be live-streamed. Over 300,000 employees across all divisions will watch the restoration ceremony in real time." Aisha turned slightly toward him. "Good. Let them see what accountability looks like when it is no longer whispered behind doors." "Yes, ma'am." "Oh." She walked slowly back to the center of the lobby. The faint hum of the chandelier followed her steps, scattering fractured light across her yellow suit. Elena Ruiz stood by the counter, still clutching the guest log against her chest like a diary of truth. Gregory Vance remained seated in the corner chair, his head bowed, his expression unreadable. Aisha stopped in front of the counter and looked around at them all. "Do you know what this building will remember when the night ends?" she asked. No one spoke. "It will remember silence," she said, "because silence is the sound that precedes either cowardice or courage. What you choose next determines which one it becomes." Her voice was calm, but every word carried weight. Elena broke the silence first. "Miss Carter, I do not want this to be remembered as your humiliation. I want it to be remembered as your victory." Aisha gave her a faint smile. "No, Elena, it should not be remembered as mine at all. If this becomes about me, we have learned nothing. It should be remembered as the night when everyone in this room learned that respect is not optional." Gregory lifted his head. "You really believe people will change after tonight?" Aisha turned toward him. "They already have. Look around you. Every person in this lobby has been changed by what they saw, even if they do not understand it yet." He nodded slowly, eyes wet. "I keep thinking about what you said, that I never looked long enough to see who was standing in front of me. You were right. I saw your clothes, your skin, your confidence, and all of it made me defensive. I thought power was something I had to protect, not something I could share." Aisha studied him quietly. "Power that needs protection is not power. It is fear pretending to be control." The words hit him harder than any accusation could. He lowered his head again. Marcus looked at his tablet. "Ma'am, we have just received the first internal responses from other branches. Managers are sending messages to confirm they are preparing diversity and ethics statements before sunrise." One of them just wrote, "Tonight was the night I stopped being blind." Aisha closed her eyes for a moment. Then it was worth every minute. The faintest trace of exhaustion crossed her face, but she did not show weakness. She simply existed in the space like it belonged to her again because it did. Elena's voice came softly. "Miss Carter, if I may ask, after everything that has happened, do you still believe in forgiveness?" Aisha looked at her. "Yes," she said, "but not the kind that excuses. True forgiveness is not about letting people escape their guilt. It is about freeing yourself from carrying their ignorance. Forgiveness does not mean you forget, it means you refuse to be defined by what was done to you." Elena's eyes shimmered. "Then you are stronger than most of us." Aisha shook her head. "Strength is not inherited, Elena. It is practiced, like truth." The rain outside had softened into a slow, rhythmic tap against the glass, like the heartbeat of the city keeping time with the conversation. A young bellman who had been standing quietly near the elevator finally spoke up. His voice was hesitant. Miss Carter, I was here the whole time. I did not say anything. I just watched. And I keep wondering, what if it happens again, to someone else? What if I freeze again? Aisha turned toward him and stepped closer. Then, remember this night, she said. Remember the sound of silence and how heavy it felt. Remember that courage does not wait for permission. It simply steps forward when truth is threatened. He nodded, his voice trembling. I will. Aisha placed a hand gently on his shoulder. Good, because when I was your age, I froze too, but I never forgave myself for it. You still have time to choose differently. The boy's eyes widened. Thank you, ma'am. She smiled softly. Do not thank me. Prove it. Marcus cleared his throat. Ma'am, security has informed me that the news crews outside are now broadcasting live. The story has already spread globally. People are calling this event the Night of the Mirror. Aisha tilted her head slightly. A fitting name, she said. Because tonight, everyone saw themselves reflected, some with pride, some with shame. Gregory spoke again, voice trembling. And you, what did you see? Aisha looked at him for a long time before answering. I saw the child I used to be, the one who was told to leave a lobby just like this. And I saw her smile because tonight, she was finally allowed to stay. That single sentence silenced the room completely. Even the faint hum of the lights seemed to fade. Elena took a deep breath. Miss Carter, she whispered, you turned pain into purpose. Aisha's expression softened. That is all pain is meant to be, a teacher. If you ignore it, it rots. But if you listen, it refines you. Outside, thunder rumbled softly in the distance, low and distant like the final note of an unfinished symphony. Marcus glanced at his watch. It is 11:50, 6 p.m., ma'am. Aisha nodded. Then it is time to close this night. She turned toward the room one last time. Tomorrow, when the sun rises, the world will ask what happened here. Some will call it a scandal, others a revolution. But the truth is simpler. It was a correction, a reminder that respect is not a luxury, it is a requirement. Her voice dropped into a calm whisper. And if you ever forget that, come back to this lobby. Stand in the silence. It will remind you. The clock on the wall ticked to 11:57 p.m., 104 minutes since the insult. The lights of the Horizon Grand shimmered softly, as if bowing their heads in agreement. And as the rain outside quieted to nothing, Aisha Carter looked toward the doors once more and whispered to herself, my father can rest now. It was not a statement, it was a benediction. A closing prayer from a woman who had turned injustice into architecture, silence into strength, and one single night into a legacy that would never fade. It was 11:59 p.m., 106 minutes since the insult, and the Horizon Grand had grown utterly still. The city lights outside flickered across the wet pavement, gliding like liquid gold through the glass walls. Inside, the air held a sacred weight, as if the building itself understood it had witnessed something wholly disguised as human. Aisha Carter stood alone now. Marcus had stepped aside to finalize reports. Elena was quietly assisting the last remaining guests, and Gregory Vance sat motionless, his thoughts heavy and unfinished. The echoes of the night raised voices, sharp commands, and one unforgettable insult seemed distant now, softened by truth's aftermath. Aisha walked toward the counter, the same one where humiliation had tried and failed to define her. Her fingertips brushed against the cool marble surface. The reflection staring back at her was not a woman in power, it was a woman in peace. She exhaled deeply, the kind of exhale that releases more than air. It released history. Behind her, Marcus's voice came softly. Ma'am, corporate has issued a statement of support. They called tonight the turning point of the Horizon legacy. Aisha nodded without turning. Good, she said. But let it not be remembered for its apology. Let it be remembered for its awakening. She looked up at the chandelier, the same light that had once illuminated prejudice now radiating clarity. Every generation inherits a wound, she said quietly, almost to herself. Ours was silence. But tonight, we stitched it closed with courage. Marcus closed his tablet and looked around the lobby. It feels different now, he said. Like the building is breathing again. Aisha smiled faintly. It is, because truth always restores oxygen where lies once suffocated. The rain outside had stopped completely. Through the glass, the first hint of dawn appeared faintly on the horizon, a pale line of silver stretching across the skyline. Aisha took one slow step toward the door. The marble floor caught the reflection of her movement, creating the image of two women walking together, the one who had been insulted and the one who had forgiven. She stopped at the threshold and looked back at the lobby one final time. "When people tell this story," she said softly, "they will remember the man who shouted. But I hope they also remember the woman who stayed." Marcus swallowed hard, his voice unsteady. "Yes, ma'am, they will." The clock struck midnight, 107 minutes since the insult. Aisha Carter stepped through the glass doors into the quiet city night. The wind lifted gently against her coat, carrying the scent of rain and renewal. Behind her, the horizon grand glowed with light again, not from chandeliers or cameras, but from conscience. For the first time, the building truly lived up to its name. It was a horizon indeed where darkness had ended, and a new kind of morning had begun. The night had surrendered to morning. It was 12:15 a.m., 122 minutes since the insult, and the city outside was beginning to breathe again. The storm had passed, leaving the streets slick and silent. In the faint glow of the streetlights, the horizon grand stood gleaming like a monument freshly polished by truth. Aisha Carter walked down the empty sidewalk, the sound of her heels steady against the wet pavement. Every step carried the rhythm of closure. She did not rush. She moved with the composure of someone who had finished a war without ever raising her voice. Her phone buzzed once. A message from Nia appeared on the screen. "Live streams have ended. Public sentiment is overwhelmingly supportive. People are calling it the Horizon Lesson." Aisha smiled faintly. She typed only 2 words in response: "Let them learn." She slipped the phone into her coat pocket and looked up at the sky. The clouds had broken apart, revealing thin strokes of silver moonlight filtering through. She thought of her father, the quiet man who had endured decades of dismissal, who had swallowed words to keep his job, who had once been forced to look away when his own daughter was told to leave a lobby. She whispered into the cool air, "We stayed this time, Daddy. We stayed." The breeze carried her words upward, folding them into the night as if the city itself had heard and understood. Behind her, inside the glass facade of the hotel, staff members began turning off the last of the lights. The chandelier dimmed slowly, its reflection rippling across the marble floor one final time before fading into soft shadow. For the first time, the building looked humble. Not grand, not intimidating, just human. Aisha paused at the corner of the block and turned back to face it. From this distance, the Horizon Grand looked smaller, no longer the tower that had tried to belittle her, but a place that had been transformed by truth. She whispered again, this time with certainty, "Every empire forgets who built it until the builder returns." Then she turned, her silhouette outlined against the city's quiet glow, and continued walking toward the dawn, toward the future she had just rewritten. It was 12:30 a.m., 137 minutes since the insult, and the city had begun to change color. The deep indigo of night was fading into the softer gray of pre-dawn. Streetlights hummed above the wet pavement, reflecting long streaks of gold and amber across the quiet avenue. Aisha Carter's footsteps echoed down the sidewalk as she moved away from the Horizon Grand. Each step carried her further from humiliation and closer to legacy. Behind her, the hotel's lights still glowed in the glass, a fragile monument to what the night had revealed. Her car was waiting at the curb, a sleek black sedan that reflected the world like a mirror. The driver, an older man with calm eyes, stepped out and opened the door. "Good morning, Miss Carter," he said softly. Aisha nodded once, her tone gentle. "Good morning, Thomas." As she slid into the back seat, she looked out the window at the hotel one last time. The rainwater along the street shimmered with the reflection of the chandelier still burning inside. It looked smaller now, as if the building itself were bowing. Thomas started the engine but did not drive yet. "Ma'am," he said, "I saw the broadcast. The whole city is talking about it. What you did tonight, people are calling it the moment dignity took the microphone." Aisha smiled faintly. "Then I hope they were listening." He hesitated, then said quietly, "Your father would have been proud." Her gaze softened. He always said the world would listen to truth only after it has been forced to look at itself. Tonight, it finally looked. They began to drive slowly through the city streets. The buildings loomed high and silent, their windows catching the first hint of morning light. Billboards glowed with headlines already flashing across the news. CEO challenges racism in her own hotel. The Horizon Grand scandal becomes a movement. Aisha read the words and shook her head. "It was never a scandal," she said softly. "It was a correction." Thomas glanced at her in the rearview mirror. What happens next, ma'am? Tomorrow, she said. We rebuild. But not just the company. We rebuild the idea of respect itself. Her phone vibrated again, messages flooding in from leaders, activists, and friends around the world. Some congratulated her, some thanked her, some asked for interviews. She ignored them all. Her attention was fixed on the slow, silver edge of dawn beginning to rise above the skyline. For the first time that night, she allowed herself to exhale fully. The weight she had carried into that lobby had lifted. What remained was purpose. She whispered, almost to herself. The night was long, but it listened. Thomas looked at her through the mirror, not saying a word. The car glided forward through the quiet streets as the first light of day spilled across the horizon. And as the sun began to break, the city woke to a new truth. Power had spoken softly, and for once, the world had heard every word. It was 1:00 a.m., 167 minutes, since the insult, and the city was no longer dark. The horizon had begun to glow with the first blue tint of morning, the kind of fragile light that separates night from day, ignorance from awareness. The storm had washed everything clean. Streetlights flickered off one by one, as if bowing to the sunrise. Aisha Carter's car glided across the quiet streets, past sleeping storefronts and glistening towers. The city that had once judged her now seemed to stand still in respect. In every reflection on the glass, on the asphalt, on the water pooling along the curb, she saw not her face, but the faces of everyone who had ever been told, "You do not belong here." Thomas slowed the car near the bridge that overlooked the skyline. The lights of downtown shimmered in the distance, framed by the pale beginnings of dawn. "Would you like me to stop here, ma'am?" he asked softly. Aisha nodded. Yes, just for a moment. The car came to a gentle halt. Aisha stepped out and inhaled deeply. The air was cool and smelled faintly of rain and city stone. She walked toward the railing and looked out at the horizon, the very word that bore her company's name. The city seemed endless, alive with stories both beautiful and broken. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, quietly, she began to speak not to anyone nearby, but to the dawn itself. "Every night holds a test," she said, "and every test reveals who we are when no one is watching. Tonight, I remembered that dignity is not the absence of pain, it is the decision to stand in it and still speak truth." Her reflection shimmered faintly in the water below. "They called me a guest in my own building," she continued, her voice steady, strong. "But I was never a guest. I was the foundation they could not see." She rested her hands lightly on the cold metal railing and smiled. "Now they will see." Behind her, the sky opened wider. The first clear streak of gold broke across the clouds, brushing her face with light. It was gentle, but powerful, the kind of light that does not announce itself, only reveals what has always been there. Aisha whispered, "We build, they forget, and then we return. That is how history corrects itself." Thomas watched from the car, silent, knowing better than to interrupt a moment that felt larger than words. Aisha took one final look at the city, the hotels, the streets, the world she had just changed, and turned back toward the car. As she stepped inside, the dawn fully arrived, flooding the skyline with color. The clock on the dashboard glowed 1:03 a.m., 2 hours and 40 minutes since the insult. The city was awake again. The world was watching. And Aisha Carter, the woman they once tried to remove from her own lobby, was already writing the morning that would remember her name.